easy things, easy for me. There's just not too much going on, right? Nice and simple. And we're doing Skara brae. So we're up. We're up online now. It is being recorded, so it's 7:49, and we're going to get straight onto it. So my news this week, as I'm setting things up, is that well, I haven't been able to get hold of Sandra at all, and she seems to have changed her number, which is a bit disconcerting. So don't think anything of that. But you do ask about Sandra each week, and the person who could have been a link for me to find out what's happening with Sandra is unfortunately in a hospital himself. Peter phoned me from hospital today, and he's got some kind of heart problem. So they found out what the problem is. It's a heart problem, and that's being sorted out now. So he's in good hands. We got fairly good hospitals here. So I did actually say that I would spread a little story, which I'm going to do. So he was upset that he had to go to a Welsh hospital. He said it wasn't good enough. So with all his money, he got transferred to Cornwall, where the nurses are much more prettier than Welsh women, and he's very happy there. So he'll be back as soon as he possibly can, after he's enjoyed the company of these nurses in this hospital in Cornwall.
Okay, thank you.
Really good. Send him our love.
Yeah, he will after he's given his love to these ladies.
Yes.
you fell for that one. Thank you. Anyway, no. So on the serious note, hopefully he was. The main thing is he was well enough to phone me.
Good.
So I think being well enough to phone me, it is serious, but obviously he's in good hands. So I'm happy with that. Adam's not joining us tonight because he's still in work. So, but he's still on our roll. And that's oh god, that's three of them really. So that's that. So my news this week is that I had a really bad experience on Sunday. As I'm just going out to see my daughter in a theatre production, one of our turkeys turns up with a wing basically ripped off. With she'd had a massive chunk taken out of her chest, and I'm not exaggerating. And basically I did the usual. What I would have done was a complete triage there and then. I may have sewn the wing back on the flesh or whatever. I would have given it a go, but I gave her some antibiotics. I had to go to this thing, and then the weird thing is I phoned the vet the next day. So we put an emergency sort of when I got back on Sunday. We put bandages and stuff on. Gave her an injection of antibiotics, which I still had, and sprayed her with iodine solution. And then I spoke to the vet on Monday. I said, "Oh, look, this is what I've done. We've got a huge chunk taken out of her stomach, basically a stomach." And we both agreed that because she was still alive the next day. So I took off her bandage. It seemed to be healing. Injected her with antibiotics. Injected her with painkillers. And what made me realize that she was going to live was that she took a load of food out of my hand, yolk. So she survived. And the thing is, a human being could not take a chunk out of their belly, right? That's it. We're dead, right? We are dead, right? But because they've got so much muscle and flesh, she was able to cope with it. So she's sat alongside me, and I'm looking after her. So that's my news this week. The surviving turkey.
Do you know what caused it?
A fox.
Right.
A fox.
It's likely what it is. She was nesting in a hedge or something. She didn't come in that night. And what probably happened is the fox grabbed her wing, right? Brought her, and she was able to pull back. And she was in a sorry state when we saw her in the morning, and she just survived. So it's quite amazing.
Yeah.
I'm happy with that because it's little Baldrick's mum.
Ah, little Baldrick. And what's
Baby
she
Baldrick.
called?
No, this is called Baldrick, Baldrick the second.
Yeah, but what's his mum called?
What's his mum called?
Oh, sorry, her mum's called Parsnip.
Parsnip.
So there you go. He's eating out my teeth.
Oh,
Oh God, I don't brush my teeth anymore because there's food in it. Right, so it's Parsnip, Baldrick, and Baldrick. Anyway, now you've heard about my turkeys, right? By the way, Drina, your glasses look superiorly.
they're great.
No,
Yeah.
I got to fit you into a genre with them. I'm a glass person, as you know. I'm trying to pitch the sort of 70s Art Deco type stuff. Yeah, it's going there. I'm loving it. So as we're loving you, Drina, and Idris behind you, what news have you got for us this week?
I'm really sorry. I haven't got any news. Sorry.
Oh God, sometimes, Drina, we all deeply love you. We still love you, but you need to bring some news next week.
Okay.
We'd like to hear you more. Right, okay then, big creep I am. Talking about being a big creep, let's creep and lust over Anne. Anything you want to say, Anne?
I'm your laziest student, I think. I very rarely have anything to bring, and I'm sorry I'm as bad this week.
Okay, fair enough. Well, it's fine. You've turned up, so that's the main contribution that you can make. That's what you pay to do. Right. So talking about paying to do, David, have you got a cup of tea in front of you?
Oh, I haven't. Nothing to
All
say.
right then. Okay, David, if you haven't got any news. Right, so Pat G. Pat's like one of those Spice Girls. It's like one of those initials, Pat G.
No,
Go on, Pat. Give us a bit of news.
no, sorry, no news. Too busy.
Oh, okay. Well, you're too busy attending my classes on a Monday. Right. Okay then. Right. Right. Andy, you've got to say something because I'm just still checking, setting something up in the background. So, Andy, you've got to tell us some news.
It was Claire's birthday yesterday.
It
Oh.
was, yeah.
Oh God. What happened then?
No, she just came round. She's got a new car as well.
Has she?
Right.
Another one?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, well, that old banger was a kind of a go-between, and that was just to keep her going. But
Yeah.
she's got a new another Picasso now, Renault Picasso.
Renault Picasso.
Yeah.
Is it brand new or is it second
No,
hand?
no, second hand, but a good one though.
Is it? Where did she get it from?
I don't know actually, but she came round to show us it when I was working on the lodge. And when it was literally, as I was, the truck was arriving, the big 7.5-ton truck was arriving with all my plaster on. I said, "You can't stop there, Claire. There's a big truck coming and it's going to block the road. To show you my car." But nobody to show it to. So,
And it was her birthday as well, Andy.
yes, yesterday was a birthday. Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Happy birthday to her, man.
Absolutely. So.
Right. Okay. Brilliant. Okay. So, right, Margaret. Right. What I'm going to do? You've got to tell us something for a couple of seconds because I've got to run and get my tea. Go for it.
Oh, well, the only thing I've seen, it just popped up on my phone. Large ice age tools. Giant stone artifacts found on rare ice age site in Kent.
Ooh.
Giant ones. Did you say giant tools?
800 stone artifacts thought to be over 300,000 years old, buried in sediments which filled a sinkhole and ancient river channel. Yeah, that's a lot, isn't it? 800.
Yeah.
That is quite a fair few. I've got to be honest with you there.
And they were so big, they were giants, over 22 centimeters long. The biggest, a colossal 29.5 centimeters in length, is one of the longest ever found in Britain. Giant hand axes like this are usually found in the Thames and Medway regions.
Right.
But these are absolutely massive.
Big ones.
From the
Yeah.
time of the Neanderthals.
Well, we know, yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, I've heard about this. Actually, can I just ask you all something? I've started my podcast going again, and for a specific thing. And I've got a podcast account, and I actually sat back in a week, and I thought, you know, some days we do about 3 or 4 items of the week, and there's obviously loads of items of the week this week that we just haven't done. And I just thought, well, should I do a podcast that I send to everybody like on a daily basis with archaeological news that is happening? You can either click on it or listen to it. And I just thought, you know, maybe people will be interested in it. I don't know. But if you've got any thoughts on that, let me know. Right. So we are started at, and Skara brae, somebody mentioned to me today, they gave me a quote. And they quoted this: early significance to ruins. And what they said that meant was that people had significance to sites that we don't see today, i.e. people in the past saw things differently, as we've been saying for a very, very long time. We've got to be very careful of that. So when we look at something like Skara brae, and we look at, we've got a few little plans today, you know, we've got a couple of images of artifacts, not many. We've got one of the rooms that we look at, and we just sort of go through it in a sort of pseudo-academic way. That's what we're doing Skara brae today. It's a site that I've been to on a number of occasions, and it's a site that springs to being extremely significant. It's a type site. And what we mean by a type site, it's typically Neolithic, and it's of the Neolithic, except it's not. Because it's very advanced for the time, and in fact it's so advanced that we're looking at it and thinking, you know, we look at archaeology from other places and people are living seemingly in squalid conditions and in round houses, and they get very wet and damp in the winter and all these other things. But then again, did they? Because lots of other parts of Britain, the archaeological evidence hasn't survived because it's been made of timber. So what we do see with Skara brae is it's constructed out of stone. Because it's constructed out of stone, we really start to see into the Neolithic way of life. But as sites go, the site of Skara brae, other than 1 or 2 other examples in the Orkney archipelago, is fairly unique in the British Isles. So bear those points in mind, bear everything that I've said in mind. And what we'll do, we'll gently go on to Skara brae now and sort of gently ease into it. And a nice bit of text today to look at, and that's what we're going to do. And let's just start looking at some of the images. And bingo. It's quite a pleasant evening outside as well, after the rain. And that is a little figurine that was found at Skara brae. You're talking about centimeters on that one, under 10 centimeters in height. It's a tiny little object. And we think about lots of things, lots of unusual artifacts coming from Skara brae. You know, this weird object. And one thing that Peter would jump in there and say, these are talk stones. Well, we don't really know what these are, but they are very highly advanced for the Neolithic site of Skara brae. But I'm using the word highly advanced. And in some ways that's like very disrespectful. It's like saying the pyramids were highly advanced, and therefore did they really create these things? Did they really make these things? Yes, they did. And I think we use the word highly advanced, not in fleeting reference to Skara brae, but what I would use the word highly advanced to describe Neolithic civilization overall in Britain, and then humanity highly advanced overall. Not taking history and archaeology for granted, trying to get into the minds and the brains of these people. And that's something that's not absent at Skara brae. And I know one of you has been to Skara brae with me, and that's Pat. I don't know if any of the others have been to Skara brae. I know Peter would have been to Skara brae with me. And you know, obviously, anything that I do say about Skara brae, and you have been there, or you've got other experience on television, it would be nice to hear from you, and any sort of perspectives that you have on this site. You can see at the bottom, we've got some nice images. We've got a fair few at the bottom there. So it would be, and that's a little bit of a plan from the likes of Gordon Child. It's a bit distorted because it's an initial plan of the site. And the one on the left, number 5, is a workshop. And number 3 is one of the famous ones. And if we start to get into that, and we start to get sort of a play on this, and we start to see this. There we go. Hang on, there we go. That building there, number 1, is the famous one. And it's the one that's in all the photographs. And we'll do those photographs today. So what it would be good to do is, where is Skara brae? Now, Skara brae is so far away from, in many ways, many of us will never get to Skara brae or never see it, because you know, it's quite a long distance from Cumbria. It's a bloody long distance from Barry and the Vale of Glamorgan, a long distance from London, a long distance from Cornwall. And it's on an island, so that sort of restricts it. But in many ways, being on an island is preserved it as well. Well, when you're on Orkney, if you said that Orkney was an island, you would be lynched. Mainland Orkney, correct myself. Orkney is made up of history everywhere. It's boldened. You go down the road, you drive down the road, and you see monuments. I've been to Orkney with many hats on to organise excursions, escape to Orkney because I was not in a good place. Going to Orkney because I've got my university. Going to Orkney with somebody I'm in love with. So I've been to Orkney for lots of different reasons. So I've experienced the archaeology from different points with different feelings. But the sites themselves overpower you anyway because of the level of preservation and the difference. And this sort of interplay with soft and hard. And what I mean by that is, in many places where they're making timber buildings, like at Skara, and then later on at places like Flag Fen, these are like peaty boggy areas, and usually timber doesn't survive, right? And if that timber didn't survive, we'd have no idea how people lived in those other periods in other parts of Britain in the Neolithic period. But we certainly understand where we're going at Skara brae. And the story of Skara brae is very much linked in with last week as well, with the archaeologist Gordon Child. And one thing that hits me about Gordon Child, and one thing that hits me about lots of archaeological sites that you visit, the original excavators seemingly have been given a back seat. So, for example, you know, if you go to see Tutankhamun's tomb, you would be mistaken for not realizing who excavated it. And and that's similar to Skara Brae. You know, if it wasn't for Skara, if it wasn't for Gordon Child, if it wasn't for Howard Carter, if it wasn't for Heinrich Schliemann, if it wasn't for Arthur Evans, the list goes on. Most of these archaeological sites wouldn't be with us today. And I don't think we give the archaeologists who excavated these sites the credit that they deserve, because at the end of the day, it's our skill, it's our canvas, it's our performance. It's like, for example, you see a work of Picasso, you know, Picasso painted it. What I'm trying to say is that archaeology is as much as a science as it is an art, and it's in the realm of the people who originally excavated these sites, that gave us these sites. Lecture over and done with on that side of things. And this is a lovely little map of some of these islands. And one thing that I would say is that you've got islands like North Ronaldsay, you've got islands like Westray, the Nap of Howe, Sanday, Stronsay, Ede, Rousay, Shippinsay. All of these islands have their equal share of archaeological monuments from the Neolithic period, Bronze Age, earlier, and so on. Looking at that map there, you can quickly see that Orkney doesn't really have really tall mountain ranges other than the island of Hoy, 75 meters above sea level. Well, one thing I would say to give us a type of context with Skara Brae is that Skara Brae, back when it was being created in the Neolithic period, would have been raised up above the landscape. And one of the things that we always forget about Skara Brae is that what was excavated in Gordon Child and revealed in 1850 was only part of a site. So when you go to Skara Brae today, we can mourn about the loss of the rest of the site. But if we remember that it was much bigger, we can appreciate the gravity and importance of the site in a wider scale context. Skara Brae, Barnhouse. If you go from Barnhouse to sort of you get those big lakes. There are big lakes there, okay, and that's basically where the likes of the Ness of Brodgar is. You can just see it. You can see these little pool type things above Barnhouse. That's the Ness, the locks, the two locks on either side of the Ness of Brodgar. So let's start giving us a little bit of information. And there's a little bit of a plan that we did have a little look at before. So as we're starting to get into the site and starting to understand it, and this little creature here wants a little warm. So there we go. Let's give you a little bit of information about this site to let us flow. Skara Brae. Again, don't forget Neolithic, don't forget stone built. It overlooks the Bay of Scale, and overlooking Skara Brae, not too far away, it is Scale House. To get to Skara Brae, you go to the museum after visiting the car park, the museum, and then you go on a journey along the footpath. It's got a timeline, so it sort of says, well, 1969 we walked on the moon, and then it sort of says, Second World War, First World War. We've got a little bit of a timeline, and you follow this timeline, and it gives you little events along the way. It's fascinating, and the timeline is so long, and the events are spread out in sort of order. So there's obviously a tiny little gap between the First and the Second World War, tiny little gap between the death of Queen Victoria, and then it goes on and on and on and on, and then you got lots of different events, huge gap between that and 1066 and so on. It gives you an idea of perspective to how the landscape at Skara Brae, how distant in time this site is. And it's one of the prizes. It's one of the prizes of Orkney, and it's something that you know, the Orcadians are very, very proud of. It could be said that Skara brae consists, what is of Skara brae at this minute. So we can sort of, yeah, overlooking the sea, there it is, house building number 1. Just going to scroll through these, we'll go back, right? And this here, this is rather interesting. So if we go with this one, it's got like 10 houses here. Now you're looking at this when they show the site, you could be mistaken for thinking that these 10 houses were all in use at the same time, but the ones that in green, particularly the one on the right hand side and number 10 and number 9, were more than likely probably more or less out of use by the later phases. It's likely as well that underneath all those buildings in red, we'll forget about that word phase and so on, underneath all those buildings in red, there were probably earlier phases of buildings made of flagstones, and basically what we find is that earth supports the walls, and the site is actually built within a limpet mound. Now, some people argue that the limpet mound was created around the site. Others argue that this site was created within a limpet mound. So different ways of looking at that. And the earth supports the walls. Hang on, is that somebody else who's just joined us? I think it is. Hang on a minute. That's a bit odd. Hang on a minute. I'm just going to go off there a minute and just see who that is. I should have given somebody a bit of control. Hang on a minute. Dog on the pot a minute. Hang on. Hang on. Right, stop the share. Somebody else has joined us, so I need to give you somebody else control. Hang on. Adam. Right, Andy, just in case anyone else joins us, I'm going to give you a bit of control, okay? Good. Right, anyway, back to where we were. Anyway, nice of you to join us, Adam. Right, anyway, let's get back to where we were. And get back to that image, and there we go. Right, now what was I saying? Let's get back to it. So what we've got with this, we've got buildings with hearths. We've got buildings with little sort of clay-lined boxes where you can put sort of sea fish in, or sort of things that you want to sort of keep fresh. There's stone beds, there's cupboards, there's also a sewage system there which had operational toilets, and obviously that's the drainage, and water would have been constantly flowing through them, and that water constantly flowing through it would have washed away all the rubbish, and all the human waste and animal waste into little culverts, which would have led into the sea. Now that's really, really advanced. I've thrown that in there quick. That's really, really advanced. And one thing, when you think about it, lots of medieval houses didn't have that. In fact, lots of Tudor houses didn't have that either. In fact, there are places in Wales that didn't have sanitation, and sanitation until like the 1920s, you know, and this site itself had drainage and access to fresh water, and lots of other things that people didn't have in the 1900s. You know, this is how advanced this site is. This is how fascinating and amazing, and without fail, that this site is. So if we sort of, again, looking at this sort of flowing and sort of giving an idea, and you've got the hearths in there and sort of gently sort of flowing into that. So one thing that my notes tell me, you know, this is one of Europe's most complete Neolithic villages. So we do have Çatalhöyük, which people would say is in Asia, but in regards, this is one of Europe's most complete Neolithic villages, except half of it was eroded into the sea. But but this is as complete as it gets. Now, this site itself dates to approximately 5,200 years ago. So that's 5,200 years ago, which is quite a distance in time. It may actually, as we've already said, date to earlier. And this is part of the UNESCO World Heritage Landscape. And, you know, this is an incredible gem to actually have in Orkney. And it's classed, it's referred to as the heart of Neolithic Orkney. And this is as classed as important as Stonehenge, as important as the Great Pyramids of Giza, and is some refer to it as the Scottish Pompeii, and it's in the care of Historic Scotland. It's looked after. It's basically operated also by the Orkney Island Council, and the preservation of the site as you sort of walk around. Look at that. And when you actually go there, it does look like that. It actually looks like that. It's amazing. And it is protected from the sea there. And this is where the sort of story comes in. And there's a little building at the end here that lots of people usually sit in when it's wet and raining. And I think I've been to this site when it's been raining. And I think I went to this site with Pat when it was actually quite a nice day, actually. But when it's raining, it's a nice site to visit as well, because there's nobody else around. And it's likely, some believe, that there's more buildings at the top of the screen, right? Because north is actually on the screen in the left-hand corner. But obviously, the top of the screen, there's more of the village that paints into inland, we do believe, from some geophysics that has actually taken place at the site. And we know that there was more of the site off the screen at the bottom, in a sort of northerly direction, because there's reports of it being eroded into the sea in 1850. Now, this is sort of where the story really begins when we think of Skara brae. Now, after the break, right, I've forgotten to put an image in that discusses the possibility, and this is going to really interest Adam, that discusses the possibility that there might be a form of Neolithic writing that's actually been found at this site, which I'm sure some of you will be fascinated with. I'm going to make sure I get that image on here as well. I'm sure some of you will be fascinated with this, something that I've been talking about for a while. So in the winter of 1850, and this is well documented at Scale House. Now, it belonged to Scale House at that stage. In the winter of 1850, a severe storm hit Scotland, causing widespread damage and over 200 deaths. So to sort of give you an idea, if we go back to this, hang on a minute, get back to the bottom of the screen. That's sort of referred to as Scale Bay. There's a little nick there, which is Scale Bay. In the Bay of Scale, the storm stripped the earth from a large irregular knoll known as Skara brae. So there was a bit of, a spit that stuck out, which is no longer with us today. And when the storm cleared, the local villagers found the outlines of a village consisting of several small houses without roofs. Now, you can imagine when you go to the exhibition, which is actually at Scale House, which, as I say, is actually behind here. And this is building number one. As they looked into the top parts of this, they believed that this was a building that little people lived. It looked like, little doorways and stuff. And as they looked into it, they started to think this was like evidence of little miniature people, right? And people were a bit frightened of the site. But one thing that people actually realized there and then was that these buildings themselves were without roofs, and immediately people started to think, well, why are they without roofs? And that's one of the things. How was it roofed? Was it roofed in timber? Was it roofed in whalebone? And as somebody who's actually built a roof on a roundhouse, you can actually build a roof using smaller bits of wood and tying them together and joining them together. And eventually, if you do that, you can actually have a nice roof structure, right? But very different from the way they reconstructed the site, right? Which will sort of have that image in the background. This is a reconstruction that they built, and to be honest with you, I think this reconstruction is more than wrong. But you can see on the roof there, it binds bits of woods together. Probably, I don't believe that the roof was like this at all. I would believe it was flatter, much flatter. If you build a roof like this and you put turfs on the roof, not only is the weight of the turfs quite excessive, the wind would just blow the turfs off. And this is my own experience. You have a fairly flat roof rather than a conical roof. And the reason that the thinking behind that is that the village is actually sunken into the ground. That the little street formations and the divisions of the houses are actually subterranean. It's like pseudo subterranean. And you're thinking, well, if they'd gone through so much effort to do that, why would they need conical roofs which could be exposed to the winds and actually be easily blown off? Yeah, I've seen. This is me. I live in West Wales, and we don't get the winds. We do get really gale force winds. We don't get the winds that people get in Orkney, right? I've experienced it. Pat's experienced it, right? We've seen rain in Orkney, right? That comes at you horizontally, right? Not vertically or diagonally, horizontally, right? And the wind is just pushing rain through our clothing, right? And Anne's shaking it, nodding her head and agreeing with me there. I don't believe that roofs were like this at all from experience. I believe that they were more or less flat, a mixture of probably bits of timber that washed up, some timber that was still on the island, some trees that still grew there, and also some whalebones as well. But to be honest with you, if you've got 10 buildings and maybe more than that, you're not going to find enough whalebone to actually span the roofs of the structures either. And you can't put stone, lintels of stone above this as well, because it's just too excessive. William Watt of Scale, a son of the local lard, who was a self-taught geologist, became an amateur excavator of the site. But after 4 houses were uncovered, work was abandoned in 1868. And do you know what? Bloody good job too, because he probably did more damage than it was worth. So which of those 4 buildings? That's another kettle of fish altogether. And then the site remained undisturbed until 1913. And I'm going to show you an image, and Margaret's going to start to sob. Where's that image? Oh God, where is it? I specifically put it on here. It was on here. I'm gonna have to find it after the break. Right, so what we're going to do is put the aerial view back on. There's a couple of images missing, so I'll get them after the break. The site was abandoned. They excavated the site. The site was abandoned. And the site remained undisturbed until 1913, when during a single weekend, the site was plundered by a party with shovels who took away an unknown quantity of artifacts. And that, to me, is the tragedy of the site. You almost feel that you really wish that the site had just been left and not excavated, just left there. Now, what you're seeing now, in 1924, another storm swept away part of one of the houses, and it was determined the site would be secured and properly investigated. Now, I just sat back drinking my tea at this minute, trying to get into the moment. When you go to Skara, brae, you've almost got the impression that when it was excavated only for the first time in the late 1920s, when in fact we know it was investigated and mucked around with in earlier periods. In a way that's deliberate, because they want to create an experience of the site for you, and they but a lot is missing, a lot is gone. It's a if you want to say that this site is like the Pompeii of the north, Pompeii has suffered the same tragedy, where evidence is missing, and you're never going to get a complete picture. You're only going to get part of a picture. So they secured it. They it's taken a long time for them to really secure it and decide that the site needs to be properly investigated. I'm going to say it, in the 1920s, Orkney was still hillbilly country. Shetland definitely was. And, there was no real protection for any archaeological sites in Orkney. But in the 1920s, the job was given to the University of Edinburgh's professor, a chap by the name of Gordon Child. And in 1927, he needed a place to excavate. So he decided to go to Orkney with the students. As we mentioned last week, Gordon Child hated archaeological excavation, but his name is very much attached to this site, and it's sort of his label, his sort of broadcast onto the site, is something that we're always going to be left with. And in many ways, Gordon Child was a good bet, because, as we mentioned last week, Gordon Child liked to see the little people. Now, if this site had been excavated by anybody else at the time, maybe even the likes of Stuart Piggott, who would have come along a few years later, maybe he would have thought, it's a domain of a king or something. I'm putting words into somebody else's mouth. Maybe that's completely wrong, but this site itself is of that sort of thinking, where Gordon Child would have really wanted to get into it. And this is, again, you're looking at this, and it's such a lovable site. Again, number one there in the foreground there, and that's the workshop over there. And actually, you can actually get an idea that everything's linked. You've got sort of little subterranean entrances. Sort of all this is sort of linked in and around here, and it's absolutely fascinating when you go there. But not all of this is contemporary with, that building there in the bottom. That's not really contemporary with the rest of the site. That's earlier. And again, mounds of earth, walls, shells, and all these other things that actually come with the site. But they've done an exceedingly brilliant job of showing you, describing the site in the way it's presented. And over here, I've never been into this little building, but you've got a little building over here that has got, that's more like it. That's not where the reconstruction is. That's more like it. I like that building, the one there that they've slightly reconstructed on the left there. That's more like the roof type of thing that I would go with. So the inhabitants of Skara Brae, it's likely were makers of their own pottery. And again, grooved ware, which I will show you an image after the break. And they've got their own pottery, which is great. Now, one of the, this is, they describe that the exact description of this type of site is an earth sheltered site. In other words, that means that the houses used earth sheltering, sunk in the ground into mounds of prehistoric domestic waste known as middens, i.e. the shell middens. Obviously, some people believe that the shell midden came after. Others, like myself, the shell midden was already there and decided to build this site there. It was likely that there were millions and millions and millions of shells built up in a mound, which had just been placed there for whatever reason. We've had the lectures about limpets, I know, and we couldn't really come up with a conclusion. So, but the limpet mound being there, or unshell mound, general shells from different periods, general shells from different mollusks and so on, bivalves and univalves and so on. That obviously proves that people have been living there for a very, very long time before the Neolithic site is constructed. So this for me yeah, it is one of the best ways of living, a pseudo subterranean landscape, and this provided the houses with a stability and also acted as insulation against Orkney's harsh winter climate. Now, you know, I've always gone along with this, you know, guys. I've always thought that Orkney has got a harsh climate, and I've been there in February, April. I've been there in July and August, and I've been there in September. I haven't been there in December time, but I've experienced some harsh weather, but it's weather I can cope with. And the other thing as well is this site, like lots of the other sites that we excavated in Orkney, were further away from the sea, and there was a few more trees around back then. And you're thinking, was it as harsh as archaeologists make out? And the temperature may have been a little bit warmer than it is today. So was it as bad as we make out? So why did they need to live in these types of buildings? Because it was the best way to live. You know, it had everything. You know, it was cool in the summer months and protected you in the winter months. What more could you want? And if we go back to that plan and sort of get an idea and sort of focus a little bit more into a plan, let's sort of go with one of these plans. And where's the one? Oh, this is better. This is better. That's better. You can see the north arrow there, can't you? So on average, each house measures in area 40 square meters. A large square room, squarish, containing a stone hearth in the middle for heating and cooking. Given the number of homes, it seems likely that no more than 50 people lived in Skara brae at any time. Now, that's based on the buildings that are there today, right? So we know that one building was washed away in 1924. Maybe that was building 3. I'm not exactly too sure. But we know other buildings washed away in the 1850s. So how many people lived actually at Skara brae? It's a very, very difficult thing to guess. It is not clear what material the inhabitants burned in their hearths. Now, that's something that intrigues me. It really, really does intrigue me. What material did they burn? Now, we're gonna mention what Gordon Child said about what material they burnt, but this is from my experience. Now, animal dung burns really well, and they would have had a lot of animal dung. They would have had animals like the brae sheep that I've got today. They're tiny little things with horns, but I tell you what, folks, right? And don't be upset by this next word. They shit a lot, right? And they go to there's a lot that they produce, right? And when it dries out, it burns like wildfire, right? So dung burns very, very well. I know that from experience, right? And it doesn't leave much residue, right? Shells burn, right? Shells burn. Not as well, but shells do burn. Animal bone burns, not as well. Wood, as we know, burns. But what also burns is kelp. So on one of my oh, by the way, Owen's joined us online. I forgot about Owen. Owen's online. So no, thank you for joining us, Owen. So what else would they have burnt? So kelp. Now, when I went on my third archaeology company trip to Orkney, we only had a small group, and it was Bill, Kathy, and Peter. They went to a bothy, which is like a little house, and they actually burnt kelp, and apparently kelp burns really well. So they would have had a lot of material to burn. And then Gordon Child says that the fuel that they used was peat. Now, you would only burn peat in the summer months, right? And there wouldn't have been as much peat around then as there is now, because this is the Neolithic period. There's still a lot of land, right? And there's still a lot of, trees around and bushes and so on. Not as much peat left behind then. So I'm gonna say that Gordon Child has probably got a point, right? But I would probably like to say that they burnt lots of things, including human fecal material. But if the human fecal material is being washed away, and I'm gonna say this, folks, right? Washing human waste away from the house is a good idea. Drainage is a good idea, but it's also a good fuel, and it's also good to put on the fields. So I'm thinking that they may have had some kind of an outflow and may have collected some of that. But that's just me. That's just my ideas coming from me. A detailed analysis of vegetable patterns and trends suggest, since Gordon Child, the climatic conditions conducive to the development of thick beds of peat did not develop in this part of Orkney until after Skara brae was abandoned. So proving my point. But there may have been some peat there at the time of at this time, but not a lot. So that would have quickly run out. So driftwood, animal dung, that's what we're going to go with. And also we're going to go with something else that's not in the list, right? In lamps particularly, oil from whale oil, right? So it could be possible that whale oil is used as a fuel. So, there is evidence that dried seaweed may have been used significantly. At some sites in Orkney, investigators have found a glassy, slag-like material called kelp or cramp, which may have been residual burnt seaweed. And as we know, kelp is actually used in the glass-making industry today, right? So that's a good piece of evidence. So the dwellings contained a number of stone-built pieces of furniture. So let's look at one of those rooms. Let's look at room number 1. And let's get in there. And here we go. Let's not go with the reconstruction. Let's go with, wow, bingo. And actually over there, that's not a window there. Little hole. That was put in there by Gordon Child so his little niece could look out to sea, because she used this as a Wendy house. After it'd been excavated, Gordon Child had his little niece staying with him. He didn't have children himself, but his niece stayed with him, so that was good. So you can imagine using this as a Wendy house, the best Wendy house on the planet. Great. So the dwelling contained a number of stone-built pieces of furniture, including cupboards, Welsh dressers, stone seats, and storage boxes. Now, what you can also see there is that there by the fire on the left is actually a quernstone. Well, when I say a quernstone, a grinder stone. That above it, that box, we do believe that they were lined with clay, and you could keep sort of small lobsters or whatever alive in there for a little period of time before they're cooked, for example. We get lots of little things like this, and there's something else there with a little hollow in there as well. And we do believe that that's a bed and that's a bed as well. These little box beds. Each dwelling was entered through a low doorway, right? And the low doorway is on this side. That had a stone slab door, which could be shut by a bar that slid in bar holes cut in the stone door jambs. And what I'm going to say is, don't get this. But the other thing as well is, this is roofed over. There's no light in here, other than not really from the doorway either, simply because the doorway comes in from a lintel sort of corridor and a little miniature street. And one thing before I miss it is that one little story. I'm not really sure I can go with this, but Dell's got something he wants to say now online. So I want to show you a little bit of a plan. Again, we've got that plan. One of the things the archaeologists were saying was that if you follow the street plan, all these little corridors, one or two archaeologists were saying that where you've got these little niches, like that little thing there, that may have actually been used as a little shop, or people had little things to sell in there. It's a bit of a weird concept, that, but that's good. You know, why not? You know, why not people sell things off at like a little sheltered sort of area? And obviously they're working in the workshop there, which is slightly different from the rest of the complex. What Dell says, he says, I live on the coast and collect seaweed for compost. Most types of seaweeds are edible. Why would they sleep in kitchen? Right, why is he saying that? Right, okay. Right, I see what he's saying. Right, okay. Basically, actually, Del, it's not a kitchen. It's basically everything. This is the equivalent back in the day of a caravan. Basically, in a caravan, you have your little dresser. You've got your gas fire. Well, obviously, you've got your hearth. You've got your 2 box beds. You've got 4 berth there, that type of thing. You've got your grinder there. You know, everything. This is basically the equivalent of a Neolithic caravan, isn't it? Sort of set in the ground. You know, where everything's in demand, which is probably a good way to live. Oh, and also, if we go to here, hang on a minute. Let's go to that one. Over on the left there's a little hole, and that takes you to a toilet. So a number of dwellings offered a small connected antechamber offering access to a partly covered stone drain leading away from the village. It is suggested that these chambers served as indoor privies. And there you go. And you look down and you see a void. One of the things, if it's not in my notes, is sort of describing that underneath these buildings, they found a membrane of like a blue clay. And they do believe that blue clay is like a damp course across the site. So amazing level of archaeology here. Well, I've always loved the experience of going to this site. So again, back to this sort of plan again, back to this sort of actually go to here, right? And what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go off my notes a little bit to give you another little bit of an idea. Some of the excavations, more recent excavation, 1972, 1973, excavated over here, right? And over here is on the north eastern side, which sort of points towards the entranceway away from the workshop, trench 2. The reason why we're showing that is it gives you an idea of the layers that you can expect at this site, right? So if we look at this and sort of interpret the layers, right? So what we've got is the natural bedrock, right? And then what we've got is the glacial deposits above the bedrock. And then what we've got is the wind-blown sediments, right? And we've got all these layers then, these occupation layers, which are number 13, the sort of layers that spread across the site of various occupation. And then interestingly enough, you've got more wind-blown sand, another little bit of an occupation layer, more wind-blown sand, another little bit of a layer, and lots of wind-blown sand then. And then directly above this, you've got the sort of the site's been abandoned for thousands of years until you got to this layer above, where you've got these stones, and that sort of indicates other activity, probably from later periods. and sort of that sort of later understanding. So one thing when Gordon Childe was excavating, he was a very good archaeologist. Obviously, this is one of his plans, sort of truncated plans of his site to sort of get an idea of the site, right? The problem is with Gordon Childe's excavations is lots of damage had already been done to the layers that we've just seen that helps us understand the site. And that basically meant that Gordon Childe had an absence of later material because it had already been destroyed. So 7 of the houses have similar furniture with the beds and dressers in the same place. So giving us a bit of a plan. The dresser stands against the wall opposite the door. So as you enter, this is yeah, I've been calling that building number 1, number 3, but obviously that's the primary building, one building for us today. So there we go. You enter this sort of, this is number 3 on our Gordon Childe's plan. That's what I should be saying. So what we've got, this is quite an interesting plan because it's a little bit more spread out. It's a little bit truncated, but it sort of helps us understand the site a little bit more from Gordon Childe's eyes. So you enter this sort of really nice sort of room that we've just looked at, and you enter here to sort of a low doorway, and you can see that there. So actually what we should do, we should actually look at this and use Gordon Childe's eyes. He actually redrew this later on, but it's useful for our perspective. So if you follow my little pen, right, so there's the doorway, right, in red, and there's the dresser. There you go. So over on the left-hand side, you've got almost what looks like a bed there, and a bed there. And there is the hearth in the middle. You've got what would be described as a little lime box there, sort of there. So we've got that one there. And look at these cubby holes here. Look at that one there, and look at that one there. Now, there some, I think somebody, I think somebody mentioned possibly, this sort of those little 2 cubby holes on the left of the doorway. You could, in one of them you could store stuff, and in other ones it was a proper privy, or maybe it's sort of to also empty the pots and pans or any sort of rotting material or anything sort of unpleasant down it, which is a really good thing, really. Again, if we clear that there, so the first thing that you see is going to be the dresser as you go in through the doorway. That's without fail. And as one of my there's a word that Dell's used now that we'll go into, and we'll think about that now. When I did my when I was doing my master's degree, my thesis, I focused a lot on something called access analysis. And what access analysis is that when you enter a building like this, do you go towards the right or do you go towards the left? And I know that sounds really odd, right? But it's a decision that you've got to make when you go in a room. And in some specific Neolithic societies, some people might always go towards the right, or they go towards the left and flow around the fireplace on the left and then head towards the dresser. Now, there again is the dresser. Now, one thing that Dell's mentioning is the dresser a shrine. Well, when you think about it, your knickknacks and your odds and sods, lots of us have got an odds and sods fireplace, or lots of us have got an odds and sods mantelpiece, right? And that's something that we might put things on. Dell's saying this is for a holy reason. Everything in our lives is for a ritual, holy reason. Our very existence is for that. Each of these houses had the large bed on the right. So there we go. There it is on the right there. And you could say that right side of the doorway. So there we go. On the left-hand side, it's almost as if that is smaller, right? And is this repeated over the other rooms? Well, okay then. Well, when you think about it, room 6. There we go. Not room 6, house 6. House 6. Defining what a building is, whether it's and sort of house 6. So you would enter house 6, as you can see. Let's do a bit of annotation. Enter house. Oh, hang on a minute. Let's clear all that. And if you would enter it there, and you would look towards the Welsh dresser, and if you sort of look, if you go into there, and you can slightly see that the bed on the right is bigger than the bed on the left. So this is actually repeated. Now, I'm going to read out what this says, and do I agree with this? A certain writer known as Lloyd Lang noted that this pattern accorded with Hebridean custom. Well, Hebridean custom, the Hebridean Islands, is on the west coast of Scotland. It's nothing to do with the northeast coast. And this was suggested that the husband's bed was the larger, the wife's was the smaller. But then again, where would the children sleep? And you're thinking, well, why would the husband sleep in a separate bed to the wife, right? Surely the husband is going to sleep with the wife. And that sounds rather nonsense to me, but it's somebody's interpretation, right? So we've got to sort of give an idea of interpretation and an idea of sense. So cracking on a little bit. Again, then these plans get very, very much more complicated as you start to look at the site, and this sort of grows. And again, final plan of Skara brae with everything's working, and sort of main passage, this idea of the passages, and obviously with the draining going underneath, these sort of little rooms. And you can see that the house there is marked number 1, right? So it was originally Gordon Child called room number 3, and now we'll call it number 1. And it's all, and we know one thing about this site is, if you look at this and how this is worked, right? Number 1 came before number 2, because number 2 is built into and alongside room number 1. And obviously that probably means that the workshop in the phase of all this, number 8, came in another phase. So you can look at it in different ways, how sort of things make out, and how things develop within such a site like this. Now, the discovery of beads and painted pots in some of the smaller beds may support this interpretation. Well, does it? Additionally, support may come from the recognition that stone boxes lie to the left of most doorways, forcing a person entering the house to turn to the right hand male side of the dwelling. Now, do I want to do this? Do I want to do this? I thought about this before. Do I want to do this? The idea of these buildings in a context of male and female, right and left. Do I want to go down this avenue? Maybe it needs a little bit of addressing. So if we take this one here, and we get a little bit of this here, and hopefully we can move this all the way. There we go. Makes it easier for me. And we do this and we save. Right, get that. Right, okay. It used to be believed by some archaeologists, not really my belief, that I mentioned about access analysis. So when you go into a building, if we draw this, come on, let's get my little, hang on, draw, right, draw. Oh, and where's my little drawing stuff? Where's my drawings? Hang on a minute, folks. Let me get my drawing stuff. Is it going to come up? Nope. Hang on. Oh, there it is. It's at the top of the screen now. Oh God, it's all over the place. Right, I want to explain this thing that's mentioned now. And there we go, clear. So my idea about access analysis is that yes, you would enter this building and you would go possibly towards around like this, right? But I said that it's more likely that you might come in around this way, right? Other archaeologists believe, as we've already said, that you would go into a building this way, right? And I believe this is probably quite calamitous. But some archaeologists believe that you would go towards the right, because the right is traditionally the male side of a building. I know some of you are nodding your heads and saying that's absolutely ridiculous, the male side of the building. But some archaeologists truly believe that the right is positive and the left is negative. So the right being positive is the male domain, and the left being negative is the female domain. I know this was absolutely massive in the 1980s. And why? Because I saw a children's program called Not Down to Earth. It was a children's program. It looked at archaeology and history. They said it in that. They said it in that program. And you know, you've got a young influential child watching in the 80s. And this children's television program said that in the Neolithic period, buildings like this, the males were predominantly positive, and would go into a building on the right-hand side, and males would be light. And it said in this children's program that women would be negative, women would be on the left, and women would be in the darkness. And that wasn't just a children's program, that was a belief of adults. And that's the belief of some archaeologists with this. And me and David are nodding our heads and saying that's absolutely poppycock. However, you can believe that. You can believe that as a traditional thing. You can believe that as a male dominance thing, right? But as you know, I'm a bit wishy-washy and I'm a little bit feminist. I find that very difficult to put in my mind and try to understand that. So what we're going to do, we're going to go to room 8 after the break. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get another drink, and I'm going to take. I've got a couple of missing images actually. I've got a missing image. I want to show you an image of Grooveware, which I wanted to show you. Oh yeah, black and white image, and the black and white image of like carvings, which some archaeologists believe are writing. I wanted to get another artifact in there as well, because I got some artifact images, but not enough in my book. And that's I got to make sure I get them in. I missed them out. I don't know why. So that's what I'm going to be doing in my break. So we'll look at room 8. And room 8, hang on a minute, stop the annotation. There we go, get rid of that. Yeah, room 8 is there, right? And that's different, and it's different. It's a workshop, and we'll look at that after the break, and we'll look at some other stuff to do with this as well. We've got to have an image of Grooveware. And also, amazingly enough, they actually found a human flea on the site. Anyway, I've got to make my cup of tea, and it's Del. We're having a break now, so Del, go off and make yourself a cup of tea. Del's with us tonight, so I'm gonna put him on the class roll tonight as well. And this is for you, Del. Don't forget to put your shekels over today, because you told me to remind you. Don't forget to put the money over. Right, everybody else, thank you very much for that this month. Right, so we're nice of you to join us. Wonderful, Adam. So I know Adam's going to be interested in the thing about carvings. So we've got something in the chat box as well. So what does it say? Wonder if the first people that built Skara brae were already living in the area or had arrived from elsewhere. Margaret, that's a bloody good question. Stop coming up with these bloody good questions, right? Right, Margaret, get your mic on now, right? Now, to have built something like that, Margaret, right? It's the same argument with Stonehenge. people used to say that Stonehenge was built by people coming from somewhere and they decided to build Stonehenge. Absolute, mind my French, crap, right? Because Stonehenge was developed over thousands of years, right? And the idea of creating the stones in the way that they did at Stonehenge took hundreds and hundreds of years. So that wasn't people coming into Stonehenge overnight. The same argument is with Skara brae. Skara brae was built over a long period of time, hundreds of years, right? And it's very likely that maybe there is earlier evidence, and some say there is evidence at Skara brae to say that there was an earlier village that developed. And they thought, actually, there's a huge shell mound over there. Why don't we put the village in a shell mound? Which makes perfect sense. Instant installation, right? And actually, Margaret, I don't know if that's the answer you wanted, but actually, when I was building the roundhouse here, the biggest mistake that I made was that building it on stilts above ground level, right? So now that what I might do in the future is actually build soil up around the building as a wind barrier, and to actually have the building subterranean after the building's been raised, right? But if you've already got a mound of, shells or a mound of earth there, it makes sense to build in a mound of shells or a mound of earth. Adele says, hi, Pat. Right, Margaret, anything you want to say?
Well, I just wondered if they found evidence of previous buildings, and I presume if they have, they would have been stone buildings.
Not necessarily. That's the point. So where there is likelihood that there is earlier evidence of the site with those earlier buildings, the ones that I showed in green on the plan earlier on. So we got that. And the other thing as well is there's talk that there's evidence of earlier buildings in the area, right? So how early, that's the point. And then if you've got timber buildings, okay, vis-a-vis, we got loads of timber to build houses. We don't have any more timber. So now we've got to use the remains of those timber buildings for the housing. But because we can't build in timber anymore, we've got to build in stone. That's your answer. And actually, one of the other things that lots of people avoid asking the question, did people build houses out of clay and mud on Orkney, right? Nobody's ever discussed that once. They're always looking for timber buildings, right? And we know from Wiltshire that people made cob walls. I keep mentioning that a lot, more than once, right? So that's an important issue, an important point. Anything else, Margaret?
Well, I presume they started it. Would it have been one family or a group of lots of families? We just don't know, do we? Did they just build
we do know. We can see that the village is expanding because that one building number one, was relabeled from Gordon Charles of building number 3. Building number 1, you can see a building's been adjoined to it, right? Within the mound of shells.
So it could have been as the children got older, they wanted a place of their own. I wonder if it was, if they were all related.
Well, maybe not. We don't really have that evidence because in regards to human remains, nada.
And I wonder where would they get a mate from? Because it was pretty isolated, wasn't it?
Oh, they had dating sites back then. They had the internet.
So there must have been other habitations around and about for them to meet a mate, wasn't there?
There's loads of women available in Cumbria. No, but basically, you're thinking this too much, right?
Mike?
Because, yeah, I'm thinking. What did we do when we were children? When we got to 16, we wanted to leave home. Where did we go? We went over the hill, right? These people would have done the same. Yeah. They would have gone over the hill. They would have wanted to adventure. They come across a really sexy red-headed bloke or a red-headed woman, right? And Bob's your uncle. Look at Drina, and Idris is the perfect settlement. It's the perfect couple.
But if you look at Hebridean settlements even today, because they're islands, they are all quite similar looking.
Yeah.
Which, because they can't be avoided unless they, travel off the island.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I know there is very, very few human remains there. Any idea why?
That there's well, the thing is, I don't think we've really looked for them.
Yeah, fair enough.
I don't think we've looked hard enough. Orkney's not been studied enough, to be honest with you. It's Shetland's dreadfully not been covered. Orkney hasn't been studied enough. And also, when you think about the water levels rising, right, this is lucky to have survived, right? And this was far away from the sea at that stage.
Yeah.
So I think that answers your question, Andy.
The graveyard could have been on the side that's gone, of course, as well. So.
Exactly. And there's lots of Orkney is massively eroding along the coast, and Pat knows that very, very well.
It's interesting, isn't it? With other cultures, you find that they tend to bury or keep the bones, as we've found, with them some way, and yet, and maybe they took them with them when they went. But,
they may have taken them, but this is the importance of. And the other thing as well is archaeologists. I don't even know if we're going to get through all of Orkney, Skara brae tonight. But one thing I would say is that there's this story about when they excavated, they found some beads in a corridor, just like had been dropped, and the village had been abandoned, and there must have been some kind of sandstorm, and people abandoned the site. Well, bloody hell, if it's subterranean, right? Why would they need to worry about a sandstorm? Do you know what I mean? There is sand on Orkney, but there's not massive amounts of sand dunes wandering around the place. I don't really agree with that. A sandstorm will give you more. I don't go with that. You know, I'm going to go with Andy. Is simply people thought, right, we just want to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Why not?
I agree. It's very close to Scotland, so it'd be easy to get off it.
And the other thing as well is, Andy, right, why couldn't people in the past think, well, I just want a break, I want to go somewhere else? It's almost as if we think it's abhorrent that people ever thought that they wanted to go somewhere else, you know?
Well, we know they moved and traded. How did they get there in the first place?
Well, they definitely had boats, didn't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
To get the cattle, to get
stone ones.
Yeah, they had the sinking feeling. Exactly. Right. Okay. So I've still got a few things to do. And I've got to say, I've said to Del, look at text. We'll send Zoom link. That's why I can't. This new Zoom link thing is doing my head in. Right. Okay. Then. Anyway, thanks for that, Margaret. Let's see if there's anything else from Adam.
Not really. Did find what you said about the that idea about the male and the female thing in the room. That was very interesting. I think it says more about what was happening in the 80s than back then. But who's is there anything I can read up on that? You can send me over, because I'll be fascinated to have a look at that.
The male female stuff.
Yeah.
Karl-James Langford's thesis on I'll get you the link.
Sweet.
It's a good read. I've read it.
Cool.
I'm not just being a creep there. It's really interesting.
Oh, have you, Andy? You never let me know you'd read it.
No, yes. I got annoyed with it because you kept referring to another book which I don't have. So I'm going to got stuck with it. So I've got to find this other book.
Not one of the Tim Ingold books, but another book.
I can't remember who it was now, but I read so many pages and I thought, you've referred to this about 8 times. I'm going to have to get this because I don't know what it means.
I feel more inclined to go to the right always.
It's the thing is, in my thesis, I don't talk about that. You know, it's just mentioned, and it's like it's like I make this thing about, well, you know, it's access analysis and how you work with buildings is a hell of a lot more complicated. Yeah. For example, we've all got rituals when we go in a house, right? And some of us head towards a room, and then when we go into a stranger's house, we don't go up the stairs. We usually go towards the left into the living room. We don't actually follow in towards the kitchen. There's certain behaviors, and this is all ground out in thousands of years of how people think about access going into buildings. And there's also the other thing as well, is we can actually have eye barriers, right? There's a ditch in front of us, and there's a tea shop above. There's a ditch in front of us, right? And there's a path that goes left, and there's a path that goes right. And the ditch is actually quite a shallow ditch. You could actually follow into the ditch, and you could actually go to the other side. You could actually go and get a cup of tea. You want a donut, you want a cup of tea, and you want one now. but none of us will go down into that little ditch and go to the other side. Most of us will usually go towards the right, whether you're male or female. And this is how our minds have developed. We won't go straight on because we're not trained to go straight on. We're going to follow the paths, and this is how our minds work. Sorry, I've gone off on a tangent. I wish you never asked that, Adam.
Do you think that you're saying how the mind works? Do you think it would just be, you know, how you're right-handed, or it's just built into it rather than our mind thinking it through?
Well,
you know.
Well, the thing is about being right-handed and left-handed. Women are right-handed, left-handed anyway. And I appreciate what Andy said about my thesis as well. But thank you for that, Andy. Carry on, Anne.
I forgot what I was saying now.
Well, you were saying about people left
I was thinking. You said we've sort of been trained to do it, and in a way, I think we're sort of. I don't think we're trained to be right-handed. I think it's something that has developed over time for some reason. The majority of people are right-handed without needing it. They're just born that way. And
so
I wondered,
you go towards the right.
This sort of movement to the right is just part of something like that.
Yeah, you go towards
your brain.
Yes, and that there's that said. Right, Adam. Anything else you'd like to say?
No, thanks, Carl. Looking forward to the inscription stuff, though.
Well, it's not going to be massively over thingamajig, but I'll give it a go. Right, okay. Sorry, I've been a bit distracted trying to get this to Dell as well. Multitasking. Right. Anything else you want to say, Adam or Pat? Oh, not Adam. Andy and Pat.
I'm good, thanks.
I was wondering about the room layouts. That there was this. They tended to have the sort of sideboardy thing at the back with the cupboards and the beds at the side. The hearth obviously is in the middle, but even that, you wonder how. You know how we have fashions, or people do things the same, and other people want to do everything very different. In that sort of group, it seemed as though there was a set way of setting the room out.
Well, it's quite simple. It's called architecture. Basically, that you know, with these. The other thing as well is if you've got a turf roof, right?
Yeah.
And your smoke's trying to exit.
Yeah.
How is it going to exit through a turf roof? So, you know, it's going to probably this idea of a turf roof would be really heavy. It'd probably exit through some other kind of roof. Maybe a wooden slatted roof, which they probably wouldn't have had access to. There may have been a weaved kelp roof. There may have been access to reeds. There may have been access. So they've got the fireplace in the middle for a reason. And the problem is,
I see why the fireplace is there. It's the arrangement around it that seems very set. The fireplace is a sort of obvious place to put it, but you know the sideboards at the back instead of at one side, and the beds. You know, it's a sort of it seems a set layout from what. But
there is another critical reason that I discuss in my thesis. Yeah. And the critical reason is that if you don't have a candle. Well, if you don't have, basically, we got evidence of whalebone excavated at the Nessa Brodgar. We got whalebone vertebra which have been hollowed out in the middle. And if you put, we've got evidence of oil residue. You can use those as candles. But if you go into a building like this that is completely pitch black and there's no light at all, not even a fire burning in the middle, right? Yeah. If you've got a set arrangement in the buildings, right? Yeah. You can follow that set arrangement. Yeah. We see that at the site of Scatness on Shetland, that you've got certain stones that have been rubbed and have been worked away. Well, this is the point that the key reason why you've got a set layout is if it's the same in every single room, every single building, every single house, then people can find where they are in a house without any light.
Yeah, it makes sense.
It's a bit like going down a coal mine. Everything down a coal mine, you go down to the pit from the head down to the before you get to the coal face. You've got the underground toilets and the showers and the places where the pony gets and the lift. Everything's organized. So if all the lights should go out underground, you can actually follow yourself back to where the lift is. Yeah. And we miners did it, right? Cornish and Welsh miners and every other miner bloody did it, right? They're following from this tradition.
Yeah.
If you can't see and everything's the same, and we've got proof that this actually happened, right, from sites that you've got set stones that are rubbed. If you've got a set ritual going around the building, you're rubbing the same stones and it's a certain sense of wear and so on. And you can follow that with the tread of your feet. And you, if the fire's in the middle, you're not going to fall in the fire. You can follow around the fire, right? You can follow around the fire on the right and go around, or you can follow on the left and go around. I'm actually for the left. I feel like I'm more of a left person, but maybe it's because I've got feminine traits. Oh my God, I've said it. Right. Okay, David, anything you want to say?
No, thank you.
And wonderful. We'll talk to Idris. Anything you want to say? Quiet today.
I was thinking about the size of the beds, if they're beds. Would that help you decide how tall the people were?
Right. Okay. That's a really good question. Are the beds long enough for people to lie in? Are they? And that's a real. Oh my God, that's a shocking question. I don't have the answer because I've never ever thought about it. That's a really good question.
Not necessarily, does it? Because the French for a while sat up when they went to bed, so they had short beds.
Oh wow!
For a short period of time. So,
Yeah.
Well, that is the French.
Yeah. I don't know anybody else who did it, but the French did.
Yeah.
They may have gone to Orkney, of course.
Of course. With the shrews.
But it would be, I would think it'd be reasonable to assume it would be a good indicator.
And also, thank you for that. And also, Owen's saying the Faroe Islands have turf roofs they manage. Well, I've got a turf roof on my house, right? But I've got a fairly modern sort of fire with a little door on, and the smoke goes out through the wall, right?
Have you not got a membrane on yours though?
What in the fireplace?
No, on the roof. Have you not got a plastic membrane as well?
I've got 9 layers.
Yeah. Well, if you've got any membrane, it won't. But it's possible it could filter through. You know, like with the grass roofs and things, it definitely filters through, doesn't it? So.
Yeah, I can understand. I know what you said. If it's done right, it's just done right. But then again, if it dries out in the summer, roots. Oh, I don't know. Right. Okay. What we need to do. It's 9:21. I'm really aware of time, and I'm not going to get through it tonight. So we might actually have a run over next week. I want us to, Pat. If you're going to stay with us a little bit longer, we'll be back. I want us to be back just after 9:30. Okay. So everybody, I've got to crack on. So I'll see you in a moment.
Okay.
I'll pop off. Okay.
Oh, Pat, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, I'm going to pop off. I've got it.
Pat, okay then, Pat. Okay, it's been great having you on tonight.
Oh,
Bye.
Pat's got to go because you've got to get to bed.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say, Pat, before you go?
No, thank you. Thank you.
Pat, we will see you next week.
Okay, bye then. Bye.
Take care, Pat. Dal says hello anyway. Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
No. Oh, and Owen says online, before late 1700s, people sat up in bed. Well, you may have in Porthcawl, but you could sod off. I'm lying in bed. Right. Okay, I'll be back. 10 minutes. 10 minutes.
I thought of some other possibilities as to why they would build that way as well.
Oh,
Yeah.
go on.
One of them was because they were told to build it that way, like planning laws.
Planning regulations.
Commission.
And the other one was because the person that built them only built them that way. And he built all of them.
Oh. Well, I just wondered if it was.
Well, I don't know now, because didn't Carl say they were built over a long period of time? So you
Not
have to
not all of them.
yeah,
No,
they're
there's different.
they've
there
all
were
been
different-
designed at the same time.
I think it might have been one family that built one, and then they built more and more.
Yeah.
Do you think?
But as I say, that wouldn't necessarily be a reason, because if just because one person was doing it, they could think of a new idea the next time. You know how the human race likes change. We like to, I mean, there's some sort of confident in the same, but we also like to invent and change things. So that it had to be a reason rather than, like I could see that point about it being dark, and that I could see that's a good reason.
Maybe, I mean, there's a lot of modern houses are very, very similar to each other. So
My son lives in one.
It's fashion, though. That becomes fashion, doesn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
Because it changes with you can identify something with a certain period by its, because they're all the same at that point, but different the same.
Yeah. I wonder if those, they found some strange stone objects, designed objects. I wonder if they were children's toys.
Yeah.
I don't know. They are very strange, those things. I've seen pictures of those before. They're about that big.
Oh, so too big for a child.
Well, maybe not. I don't know, but they have no idea what they're for at all, and they're all different.
Yeah.
I wonder what the children played with.
I suppose they could be also thinking. I mean, I wonder if they were into games as early as that. They may have been, and had game pieces.
They look like weapons, but I think, as far as they know, they're not weapons. So. But that might be just an association we have with modern ones, of course. So
yeah.
It's an amazing place, though. I must go sometime.
So before it was discovered, was it just a big hilly mound?
Yeah. That's what brae. The word brae means hill.
Does it?
Yeah, little hill sort of thing.
Yeah, so there could be more, couldn't there?
I think Skara or something means something like burial or something. So I think they might have thought it was a burial mound or something like that. But
yeah. I think one of the wonderful things of sort of looking at archaeology at all, because I don't know a lot about it, is the kind of I know hardly anything.
You keep saying that, but you know quite a lot.
Yeah,
I've been learning, but I've only learned through coming to these classes.
Yeah, but you've been coming for years now, man. You can't keep saying it.
What? Well,
I'm learning all the time.
I mean, one is learning all the time, but I mean, I would still consider myself a very, not very knowledgeable person about it.
No, you are. You ask good questions.
Yeah, same.
But I think I forgot what I was going to say then. Oh yes, I think one of the things and why I like this coming to this is that all these discoveries ask more questions than they answer.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that makes it really interesting. It's like looking at puzzles and how, and yet trying to identify with humanity, because we are humans ourselves. Yeah. So you're trying to identify with that in a very different world you know, which probably thinks and does everything different. I think it's really interesting, in spite of, and I still feel I know nothing relative to what can be known.
It changes though as well. I mean, obviously we've been doing this class, some of us for years. I've been going to them for quite a long time, and we've touched on these subjects several times. And each time you come back, there is new information or more information that changes your view of it or the interpretation each time. So which is it's really great. So you have to keep an open mind. Yeah,
really fascinating.
I wonder how much bigger Skara brae was, because he said some of it has been lost to the sea.
Yeah.
So it could have been quite a lot bigger, couldn't it?
Yeah. Well, there's what, 6 buildings, houses, and some workshops now. Can't remember how many there are. But there's at least 2 houses have gone into the sea, I think. And I don't know what the geophysicists picked up on the other side. So it could conceivably be twice as big.
I kind of wish they'd put a great big dome over it to protect it, like the Eden Project.
Yeah.
You know, it's a bit worrying that it's so close to the sea.
They've built a seawall.
Another thing, if it had gone into us, perhaps it would be how rough the sea was, because on some other things, we've looked at, we've found whole things under the sea that have survived. Which you wouldn't think, they'd think they'd look for it there, having known.
I think the problem is that the storms have actually smashed it and washed it.
That's right. The weather could have been really much worse rather than just got sunk. It got crashed apart by the violence of the sea. Yeah.
Those steps that you see are a new thing, aren't they? Did they make steps back then?
There are steps inside the blocks, but I don't know whether there are the ones on the ones you're talking about were made by them or later.
No, the steps at Skara brae look fairly new.
Yeah, they probably are.
It was probably just a slope then, do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, I always wondered how built up they were around the outside as well, or whether that's deposited itself or whatever. So over the years.
I do believe we're not going to have enough time to do everything tonight. So I'm going to, give me a sec. I'm just going to get my drink and we're going to get into it. Carry on, keep talking. I'll go quiet now.
Yeah, also because there are many other sites up there as well, and how do they relate to it?
Oh yeah. Yeah, strange to think it was the capital of Britain back then, wasn't it?
Well, it'd be the capital of all the area all around, and other countries as well. I mean, it's extraordinary. You know.
And haven't they found pots from there, made there? Haven't they found them at Stonehenge?
They've certainly found some animal bones that they believe had come from there. So
yeah.
And then you get the Orkney Vole as well.
Oh yes, was that from Belgium?
Something like that.
Came over on a boat.
Well,
it's from the
it got
country.
there somehow, but didn't go by land. So
from the Low Countries apparently. Right. Okay. So I'm going to yes, I don't know. I'm going to fit this in next week. So we've got to run over. So I'm going to try and do I'm going to try and do lots of the things that I mentioned that I'm going to do. So anyway, let's just crack on. I've gone a bit nuts adding a few more new images. So I've gone a bit overboard.
Good.
As you can see, there we go.
Ooh.
Did somebody want to say something then?
No, it's just me saying good.
Right, yeah. So that is the sort of site plan. And when Margaret said, right, I can do this 2 leveled. When Margaret said, "Oh, it would be good to put a dome over it," well, we don't really have that type of vision to do that in Britain. However, that's not fair on Scottish Heritage, because Scottish Heritage have invested a lot of time and effort into these sites. There's even they've even got a UNESCO police, and actually stopping an archaeologist like me once. And I said, I've got a group of people from Archaeology Cymru. They have to phone the university and check us out and everything. So these sites are really well protected, and they've one thing that they say, they don't want everybody going to Skara brae. So when they come off a boat and they've got a day to look at the site in Orkney, they say, all right, we'll chuck a few people over to the museum. We'll chuck some to the Nessa Brodgo. We'll take a few to the Brocha Gurness. We'll take a few to Maes Howe and Mine Howe and all these other sites. So they get the footfall right at these sites. It's really delicate the way they treat the site. So a dome would be great, right? But as it stands, they're doing such a good site of keeping the site going, and it's such a well-preserved, loved and looked after site. So let's actually get to where some of the things that I wanted to look at and see if I can sort of do that any justice at all. So, but what we are going to do is that we're going to add those. I know some of you were talking about children's toys earlier on, and just look at that. You know, that's amazing, and you're seeing that, and you know, and it's just, one of you said they do look like children's toys. Yes, they do look like children's toys. They really do. So here we go. Let's just crack on with this. And so one thing that I wanted to do was to look at this building number 8, right? And building number 8 is a little bit over towards the side of the site. Hang on a minute. I just gotta move somebody a minute. And this is thought to be not a house. This says this is house 8, has no storage boxes, right? It's got no dressers, has been divided into something resembling small cubicles. You can sort of see that it's sort of divided off there. It's quite odd. Let's look at an aerial view of this. It does look a very odd shape indeed. It's got that access there. It's got another access. It's got a couple of accesses into this. So when they were working on this, they found fragments of stone, bone and antler, all that were excavated, suggesting that the building had been used to make tools such as bone needles or flint axes. You know, one thing I'm going to say, this is going to really upset Dell when he was saying, you know, these square rooms look like massive kitchens, you know, with a hearth and, you know, Welsh dresser and things to store animals and all the rest of it, right? If I was the workman in this workshop that they say this is, and you had a fire going, this would be the best place to sleep. Surely it would be, you know, this would be the best place to go. So they found evidence of, they think that the suggestion is that the fragments of stone and bone and antler may have been that this was a place that they were making axes and bone needles and various other things. And there was also the presence of heat damaged volcanic rocks and what appears to be a flue. So all that type of weird things that they're chucking into that sort of argument. Volcanic rocks. Well, what we have is, hang on a minute, that figure there almost looks like it's made of some kind of pumice stone, right? So that wouldn't be too far off. So this building itself stands alone. It's out alone, but there is actually connected to the network of this sort of lane sort of street format, which is around all these different buildings. And there's an indication that was it actually within the midden of limpets, or was it actually built outside the midden and limpets? But the problem is, because lots of that evidence is gone, it's difficult to work out that analogy. Instead, it is above ground. It is above the ground level, almost above sort of what they think may have been where the limpet mound was. It's really difficult stuff to work out. And the walls of this, the walls themselves are 2 meters thick. And it's almost as if it's got like a really grand entrance. So what there is it's very, very difficult to work out what this is. But what I want to do, that one of the new images, that one of the images that I basically had a black and white image missing earlier on. So I thought, right, what I'll do, I'll choose a few from the excavation. There's Gordon Charles down the drain. I tell you what, doesn't he look like one of the archaeologists in the Indiana Jones films? The German archaeologists. And look at that. Oh, I love that, because it's sort of going into the sort of dark recesses and showing how dark. Remember, this is all covered up. This is all sort of sheltered at the site. As they were excavating, they found the earliest known record of a human flea found in Europe. I just want to chuck that in there, just something to chuck in your facts. But I'm loving this Gordon Child. There he is down a drain. We're loving him lots. And there's some of the workmen. There's Gordon Child on the left. And there's his little niece on the left there. Little niece on the left. You can just see her coming in. And there's another explorer of the drain. And I'm just thinking, this is great archaeology. Real great archaeology. I'm loving this. And some of his friends there, some of his male and female friends. One of the things that we've got to look at is actually the pottery, fragments of pottery. This, I noticed, I was being very nosy whilst I was doing this in your conversations. And one of you said about some of the pottery from Orkney may have ended up down at Stonehenge. Well, actually, interestingly enough, this is actually Peterborough ware from the southeast coast of England, so the east coast of England. This is very similar to, hang on a minute, this type of pottery that was actually found at Skara brae. So we do believe that some of this pottery was actually made at Skara brae, very similar to this similar pottery that we've actually found in Peterborough. Right, so this itself led Gordon Child to think that this may be linked with people that actually moved up to the site. Skara brae, the people at Skara brae may have actually had cattle and sheep, but the sheep that they actually had were tiny little sheep, just like the sheep that I've got. Yeah, I described our male ram. I can actually fling him over my shoulder and carry him across the field. That's how small these sheep were. And actually, it led me to think in my deepest recesses of my mind, because there's quite a lot of deep recesses in my mind, lots rather good. And I actually started to remember there was a reference somewhere that not all of these, well, let's get a color illustration in there. Not all of these sort of cubicle things were actually used for people to sleep in. I think there was just some discussion somewhere that they may have actually kept animals in them, little lambs or little cattle. Gordon Child originally believed that the inhabitants did not farm at the site. He said, they kept a few animals, but they didn't plant crops. But Gordon Child, it proved that it was actually found to be wrong, because in the earlier these excavations in the 1970s, 1972, which was on the that's on the side of the site. Oh, there it is. That's on the side of the site where the workshopy thing is, just a bit north of it. And it said that in that excavation, they unearthed seed grains, suggesting that barley was cultivated. So we've got that now at the site. Fish bones and shells are common in the middens, indicating that dwellers ate seafood. Stop a minute. If the midden was already there, how do we know that these same people ate that? Limpets and sort of bivalves and univalves and all the rest of it. There's another suggestion as well. I'm trying to chuck loads of things in here. Maybe that there was actually used for keeping limpets, so they could actually use them for fishing. that for me is a bit backwards, because if you just go on the beach, you can pick off a limpet and you could just use it for fishing there and there. So that seems really impractical. That idea, it just doesn't wait with me, you know. Those stone boxes were probably used to keep things fresh. Like I keep milk fresh in a bucket, right? And I've managed to keep milk fresh in a bucket over these really hot summer months. So, you know, if you've got something like that, water, you know, to keep things fresh. And there's evidence that these were actually clay lined with like a blue clay. They discuss a blue clay at this site. Now, you know, some people go sort of against what Gordon Child said about this site. Some people think that, you know, Andy mentioned, or somebody mentioned whilst I was off, whilst you thought I was off, I think somebody mentioned maybe this is the place. Maybe this is the center of the whole thing of Orkney and what was going on. Some people actually believe it was. Some people actually believe that magic men and some kind of aristocracy lived at this site. But I'm with Gordon Child. I'm going to say no, they didn't. They didn't, because there's no real evidence to say that this was a site that the high castes lived at. Let's just go with normal people lived here, and it's probably that society in the Neolithic period on Orkney had probably very much sort of not evolved to actually having lots of people that you were going to support. If you've got an aristocracy, you've got to support them, right? I think that's interpreted as a grinding stone, the one at the back there. Others have described that as a bowl. One thing as well, I might be able to get through a bit more if I keep flowing on this today. If we, again, the green bits there, that's what I was talking about earlier on, Margaret, with like an earlier site, and there may be an earlier site under that, you know, thinking about clay and thinking about timber and all those other things that go bump in the night. The building number 7. Building number 7 is the one with the turf roof. And where did we go? There we go. That one there. The turf roof. That's not the reconstruction. We'll just go to the reconstruction in a moment, right? But that number 7 is a building that I do believe that they've actually replaced that really recently with a glass roof that you can actually now see in. And it's hang on a minute. Oh, no. I've got this wrong. I've got this wrong way round. No, I've got this completely wrong. That there was originally a glass roof, a glass roof, and they replaced it with a turf roof. I read that wrong because I never saw the glass roof there. So yeah, it originally was a glass roof, but because that caused problems to preservation, right, they decided to replace it with like a reconstructed turf one, right? And that's there. And actually in there, there's a little bit of evidence of symbols. There's some carvings in there that we're going to actually see that then lead people to think about the idea of proto-writing, which we're going to come on to in a short while. Right now, what we're going to say is we're probably going to bound through this next bit a little bit pronto-like, right? But what we're going to do, we're going to let you see this a minute. But what we're going to do, we're going to let you see this. Now, this is actually, now I'm actually hang on a minute, I can't, is that, yeah, I'm actually not sure when this was taken, but I think this was taken before the excavations I'm sure this was taken before the excavations in 1927, because this was one of the buildings that may have been already excavated, not sure, but don't quote me on this. But look at that, look how, and look at the boundary walls that have since been removed, and look how close that is to the sea. If that had not been preserved in the way that they preserved it, that would no longer be there. It'd be eroded into the sea, it'd be gone. It's a massive erosion on Orkney. Anyway, Gordon Child originally believed that this site was not Neolithic because we still didn't have dating and so on. And he believed that this was actually Iron Age, right, or early Iron Age from 500 years BC. This interpretation totally changed because in the 1970s, 1972, 1973, the radiocarbon dates simply told us that the site dated from as far back of around 5,200 years ago, and may have been in occupation on use for maybe up to 600-700 years, which is quite phenomenal, right? So when me and Andy were having that discussion earlier on and sort of different phases and stuff, so it's likely around 4,500 years ago that the site was finally abandoned, but it's a long time for a site to be constructed. And lots of people argue it was because the climate changed and become colder and wetter, and there was a massive sandstorm, and people just abandoned the site and they panicked and so on, and they based that the site being abandoned because there was artifacts left around the site, like beads along the corridor and this and that, and all these different things were left around the site, blah 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 blah, and it's proof positive that the site had been abandoned in a rush. But then again, the site had been mucked around with in the with those little excavations in the 1868, and obviously damaged from the storm in 1850, and it was obviously people mucking around with the site in the 1900s. So all that evidence has been sort of mixed around with, churned around with, so we don't really know what happened with the site. But I don't think the site was abandoned because it got colder and wetter. I don't think the site was abandoned because there was some kind of a sandstorm. But we're going to read out what some people actually believe happened to the site, which gives us a sort of unbiased view about what's going on. I simply believe that people had just had enough of living there and went somewhere else. If they hadn't gone somewhere else, then we wouldn't have had a Bronze Age in Orkney. We wouldn't have had people living in the Iron Age in Orkney. So things couldn't have been that bad because people hung on in Orkney. Anyway, we're gonna quote this. This is this quote itself is from a researcher known as Evan Haddingham. He says, as was the case at Pompeii, the inhabitants seem to have been taken by surprise and fled in haste. For many of their prized possessions, such as necklaces, statues of Lloyd George, necklaces made from animal teeth and bone, or pins of walrus ivory, were left behind. The remains of choice meat joints were discovered in some of the beds, presumably forming part of the villagers' last meal. Can I ask you why there's food in the beds? What the hell? One woman was in such haste that her necklace broke as she squeezed through the narrow doorway of her home. Well, how bloody narrow was this doorway? Scattering a stream of beads along the passageway outside as she fled and encroaching the sand. Now, if anyone wants to get a good history on Orkney, go with the name Ritchie, Anna Ritchie, Ritchie, Anna Ritchie. And her work is really good. I've got a couple of copies of her work. She strongly disagrees with this catastrophic interpretation of the village's abandonment. What does she say? But this catastrophic abandonment of Skara Brae is out there. Loads of people believe it. I don't believe it. And what does Anna Ritchie say? She says, a popular myth would have that the village abandoned during a massive storm that threatened to bury it is sadly in sand instantly. I'll start again. A popular myth would have the village abandoned during a massive storm that threatened to bury it in sand instantly. But the truth is that its burial was gradual and it had already been abandoned well before the sand encroached. For what reason people abandoned the site, we do not know. And I would go with that. They just abandoned it. They just had enough and they went. Right. I got to be honest with you. It's like a relationship. Things are going really well, and you just can't be bothered with it anymore, and you just go off. I'm sure some of us have had that. I'm sure that I've known people to be living in beautiful houses, and they said, "Oh, we don't want to live there anymore. We're going to go." And there's a guy who used to come along to my class in the Rhondda. He used to have a beautiful house on the Isle of Wight. He just didn't want it anymore. He just up and left. He used to have 2 beautiful houses on Crete. He just didn't want them anymore. He just up them left and left all his stuff in them, and he just sold them. People do it today. People must have done it back then. Why couldn't it have been any different? So I'm going to come to the end in a minute, but what I'm going to do is I want this thing that these 2 things that maybe we really need to look at quickly, right? So we're going to do the artifacts thing and sort of the ball things and the etchings, but we're going to do that in a quick second. The site was farther from the sea than it is today, and it's possible that Skara brae was built adjacent to a freshwater lagoon protected by dunes, so it's a perfect place to have lived. Although the visible buildings give an impression of an organic whole, it is certain that an unknown quantity of additional structures had already been lost to sea erosion, Andy, before the site's rediscovery and subsequent protection by a sea wall. Uncovered remains are known to exist immediately adjacent to the ancient monument in areas presently covered by fields, and others of uncertain date can be seen eroding out of the cliff edge a little to the south of the enclosed area. There's more, folks. These balls, quickly. Balls. Again, that's grooved ware. That's a reconstruction of grooved ware, but nice solid sort of pottery. These balls, a number of enigmatic carved balls have been found at the site, and some are on display in the museum. Similar objects have been found across other parts of Scotland, and we've got similar things at a Roman site in sort of near Hereford, but that's something else. They're Roman. These ain't. These are Neolithic. The spiral ornaments on some of these balls has been stylistically linked to Ireland, and some of the carvings there. Similar symbols have been found carved into stone lintels and bedposts. These symbols are sometimes referred to as runic writing. So though that there is being translated as, and you can see that this is in the pottery, stone, that's also from the site. And there it is. We've got to this. We've got to this. So the symbols are sort of, this has been very controversial. It's been, people have translated this as, the vertical diagonal symbols may represent divisions. Look at that one there. Look at how that is. That was actually found at Skara brae. Is that pattern? Is that writing? And these actually date from the Neolithic period. So that's been found on one of the similar spike objects, which we showed earlier on at Skara brae. Zigzag patterns found on house 7 at Skara brae, the sheltered one, the one that had glass and now's got turf. C is an example of a sun symbol at Newgrange, something else, totally different site in Ireland. D, we've got D there, that's in house 7, and symbols on Brodgar stones at Stennis. So in other words, E, D, B, A, B, D, Skara brae, E, Nessa Brodgar down the road. So that there, if we go with that, look at the symbolism on that. And obviously, look how odd that is. It's not really organized, is it? It's sort of, hey, what's going on? And this is just over hand size, as Andy said earlier on. But if we sort of, again, we go through all of this stuff in this sort of culture, this is a nice place to end, actually. And then we go to that. And if you want, Adam, just get a screenshot of that now if you want. So one of the things that we would say about this site is that we can actually keep that there. We have found lumps of red ochre at the site, and we've got evidence that this may have actually been used for either painting themselves or on walls. So we've got evidence that there's certain evidence of some kind of plaster on the walls. So they may have painted it. They've got nodules of hematite that were highly polished, and these nodules of hematite may have been used as keepsakes, but we've got a seam of hematite nearby. Right, there is a seam of hematite nearby. So that's that. I remember visiting it. I didn't actually report it, but there's a seam of hematite nearby. that would be known to these people. They wouldn't have used iron, but they used iron for other things. And finally, closing the lecture today, just a few things, two last things. The 1972 excavations reached layers that had remained waterlogged and had preserved items that otherwise would have been destroyed, like the barley. These included a twisted skein of heather, one of a very few known examples of Neolithic rope, and a wooden handle. So wooden evidence found at the site. And finally, folks, again, we'll move away from that and just sort of give, I want to go to an image that we really haven't spent much time with, the reconstruction. I hate this reconstruction because for me, it's totally wrong, because how would you get that boat? Yeah, exactly. Don't ask. Yeah. Maybe they floated around in a room and filled it with water, but I don't like this. It's twice the size of the original, and don't like it. Other artifacts excavated on the site made of animal, fish, bird, and whale bone, whale and walrus ivory, and orca teeth, including awls, needles, knives, beads, adzes, either for ploughing or cutting down trees, shovels, small balls, and most remarkably, ivory pins up to nearly 10 inches long, huge ivory pins. These pins are very similar to examples found in Ireland. Another piece that there might be a link with Ireland, maybe. It's a bloody long way to go. So-called scale knives were commonly used tools in Skara brae, as in scale house, scale knives. These consist of large flakes knocked off sandstone cobbles, big chunky ones. Scale knives have been found throughout Orkney and Shetland, originating from this site. And on that note, we're going to call it a brae. Call it a brae. Call it a brae. I call it a hill. So we're going to call that a day now. Hopefully you've all got something out of this. I don't think we need to go back to Skara brae next week unless there's anything that we have managed to do this. I don't know how, but if you want me to do anything about Skara brae again, then all you need to do is ask. But other than that, we'll call it a day and stop the screen share. Right, okay then. Hopefully you've got enough out of this, guys. So I'm gonna find out now. Has anyone got any questions? And let's start off with David.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's been a delight having you, David. If you're gonna stay with us, David, it's a delight. If not, I'll bid you good night. But
Yeah,
David,
good night, all.
okay, David. Sorry to see you go. David, I'll see you next week. Take care.
Good night,
Yeah.
David.
Night, all.
Night, David. Night, David. Right. Okay. So, who else have we got here? So, let's see. Anything from the Wicked Witch? Who's the Wicked Witch tonight? Gina, you could be the Wicked Witch. Go on, Gina. Anything you'd like to say?
No, nothing. Thank you. It's fascinating.
But weirdly enough, I managed to bring that to a conclusion at the right time. I don't know how I managed to do that, so that's good. Right. Okay. So, who else have we got now? So let's talk about Anne.
All I can say is thank you. I thought it was really interesting, absolutely fascinating. So yes, thank you very much for it.
My dear, thanks for that. Okay, so who else have we got? Margaret.
Well, very, very interesting. You just wonder where they went, the people that lived there. You know, how could at that time, how could they have improved on what they were already living in?
Maybe they did, but they made it out of wood. I don't know. It's difficult to say.
Else. Yeah. Why didn't they just renovate it to bring it more up to date? So they must have wanted to move away, completely away, mustn't they, for some reason?
Yeah, they might have got fed up with living in stone houses.
Yeah. Or there might have been marauders that were constantly.
What was the
bothering us.
what would the alternative have been?
Well, not there. That's why they moved.
I wonder where they went then.
Scotland.
To live in a broth.
I'm guessing because it's nearest. Yeah.
Oh God, flipping heck. Right, who else have we got? Right, we've done Drina, so we've got Adam and Andy left. Give it to us, man.
I'm all right. Cheers, Carl. Thank you. That was great.
Thank you very much. I hopefully you enjoyed the writing bit as well.
Yeah, that was. Yeah, cheers for that. Fantastic.
The bee's knees. Good.
Yeah, no question.
Thank you for that. And finally, Andy.
Is there any sort of fabrics or things that have turned up there, like woven things?
Oh God, no! I'm wrapping my brains. No, but we've got evidence of, you know, we've got the flea, we've got the barley, we've got the wooden objects. You know, it's you've got the wooden handle, the Neolithic rope.
There are so many advanced things there, or what we would class as advanced things there. You would think that there would be others that may just not have found them. That's all. So.
A twisted skein of heather. What is a skein? I'm gonna look this up.
If it's wool, it's a long
piece of wool, isn't it?
Yeah, skein of wool's a long piece.
But yeah, it's a yarn. Yeah. It's a yarn. That's it, Andy. It's a yarn.
So they did. Good. Thought they might have
a yarn of heather. That's yeah, exactly. So you got it. Nailed it.
Thank you.
Nailed.
Was it there that they found jet beads from Whitby? Was that at Skara brae?
I think that's Skara. I think so. Yeah, Skara.
Oh, is it?
And also on a Mesolithic site on the south coast, Boulder Cliff, I think. I think so, Boulder Cliff. But that was the Mesolithic sort of Neolithic sort of site. No, that was the that was Mesolithic site. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So okay. Any other questions, my wonderful friends? So that's been a blast. It's been pretty interesting whether we've managed to get through that. Cool. And it was just Skara brae tonight. It's quite amazing. One site all evening. Right. So anything else anyone wants to say before we finish?
Thank
They
you.
were probably bothered by the seabirds pinching their chips.
Well, I reckon they didn't get decent internet connection because it's not good today.
Yeah, he said that Margaret. That's why they didn't have a roof. You see, that's why they left.
Yeah.
Oh, shut up. Shut up. Or maybe it was Alfred Hitchcock, the crow, the bird, right?
Oh,
and
yeah,
they just
yeah.
managed to get in, and they feasted. They feasted on all the flesh, and that was it.
They were pecking their eyes out.
Yeah, exactly. And they flew away with all the bones, and yeah,
Like they do. Yeah.
like they do. And strangely enough, I'm sorry I lied earlier on. They didn't find a statue of Lloyd George at this site. I think it was stolen.
Oh, shucks.
Not yet.
Not. I think it was stolen. I think it was.
Gordon Child, he would have had it. He was a left wing guy, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Hang on a minute. No. Lloyd George was central liberal like me.
Well, yeah, but he's been nearest to it to Gordon Child, wouldn't he?
That's true. Rather than the other way. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. Mind you, I think Winston Churchill was everything at one stage, but that's life. I think he did Labour, Liberal, and then Conservative. Yeah, I think so. I think he did all.
He was certainly Liberal for a while. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know whether Labour really
I don't
existed.
think he was ever Labour, was he?
No, I don't think so. But
all right, then I got that wrong, but it sounded good.
Can't really imagine that. But.
It sounded good. Good old Labour wasn't like Labour is today.
No. Send them all to their deaths. Oh,
exactly. I don't know what we're talking about. I think we've lost the plot. On that note, is anyone else want to say anything else today?
No.
Nope. Good one. That fascinating site. Thank you.
Adam's looking forward to coming to West Wales to feed the sheeps.
Yeah, definitely.
Sheep is.
Well, Adam's looking forward to being cuddled up with two ewes and a ram.
Right. Bring your wellies.
Yeah.
No, that is disgusting.
Well, it's going to be a muddy field, isn't it? Yeah.
Right then. Sorry, Andy. It was my raw brain. Sorry.
Vote pro gloves.
Yeah.
Oh,
right.
God.
Yeah.
All right, then. And okay, so if nobody else wants to say anything else, that's been a blast tonight. So That's really good. So I'm going to say goodnight to Adam, Andy, Rena, or Shauna, Margaret, and and Shauna's one of my sheep, by the way. And thank you very much for watching. And Del had to leave us earlier tonight, and obviously Pat and David. So obviously that's been a good one tonight. So hopefully see you all next week.
Yes, thanks.
Bye.
Bye all.
Take care,
Thanks,
bye.
Carl.
Night, guys. Night.
Bye,
It's
everyone.
my pleasure. Take care. Look after yourself. Night. And a partridge in a pear tree. Night, Anne.
Good night.
Night. That was a blast tonight. That was really good, and no major drama. Not really. I've got to get everything away now, and oh god, I'm actually quite knackered after that. Well, when I say knackered, sort of knackered. I had to do, and that quote I used at the beginning: early significance to ruins. Obviously, they had a significance, which I only used at the beginning. I should come back to that. And I've got to get the thesis to Adam. So to get that over to him somehow. How? I don't know. Oh yeah, I'll send an email of that over. I think. Anyone else wants my thesis can just let me know. Just get just sort of put my email there, and I can get a copy over to you. My master's thesis. If I can still get access to it on my computer. There you go. That's my email. So anyone else, don't forget to like and subscribe and chat. I'm going to do my OCD thing now and look in the chat box. Chat box. Wonder if the first people that built Skara brae were already living in the area or had somewhere else where. Interesting question. And the other thing as well is maybe they visited the site afterwards to sort of as a place of homage. It's interesting. Very similar to lots of these burial chambers, aren't they? These buildings. Mice how? Mice how? Oh bloody hell! I'm going to write that down for next week. Mice how? Similar to Skara brae. Number 1. Interesting. So anyway, thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you very much. I'm going to be off now. So we're sort of going to get off in the chat box on 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Off chat. Like, subscribe, join. Be great. Blue button down below. Follow my question of the week every week. Don't forget, I do this every Tuesday after 7:30 to now, and Wednesday after 7:20 odd, and Wednesday morning at 11 o'clock. Thank you very much for joining us. Take care. Nos da chi. Nostar chi. Ymwr o hyd. Bydd y siarad Cymraeg. Diolch yn fawr i chi. Nos da. Heddwch. Anyway, I'll speak to you soon. Take care. Bye. Bye-bye.